In terms of why we chose esports for the first one, and this, once again, Peter Lynch, invest in what you know, invest in what you believe in, invest in kind of what you're seeing happen around in the world around you. Tim, my co-founder, and I started talking about esports when it was Ninja and Drake blowing up Twitch with hundreds of thousands of people watching. You had Bob Kraft buying into the Boston team in the Overwatch League. It was like all of these things happening around us, and it felt like gaming was really kind of taking that next step in terms of mainstream culture. And we said, most people can't invest in the private assets that get you exposure to the space, whether that's an esports team or a company like Epic Games or something like that. Let's go ahead and put it in a way that everyone can get involved, kind of democratizing what otherwise might seem like something you can't invest in yourself.
Yeah, and it's been interesting because I think the conversation, at least that I've seen just with friends and family, has been, oh my God, can you believe that people watch other people playing video games online? And I always remind them, like, look at what the NFL or the NBA is. It's all just a matter of like competition and sport. This is just a different kind of it. The other interesting element that I found was Netflix, a couple of quarters ago, mentioned that one of their biggest competition, from a time spent standpoint, was gaming. Are you seeing that this, how big do you think that this market can get from where it's at right now and where it's trending to, the COVID effects and where it could continue to grow? Is this, how do you think about this in the broader kind of, trend?
No, it's a great question. And in terms of COVID and what's going on right now, this should be obvious anyways. More people are playing video games than ever before. More people are also watching other people play video games. And I think what coronavirus did for the industry was, due to a lack of traditional sport, you had ESPN broadcasting esports in prime time slots, and that really improved the kind of awareness. But when we look at the industry, you're talking about 400 million people globally that are watching esports. More people watch gaming and esports than Netflix, HBO, ESPN combined. So there's a ton of people watching. It just so happens that at current, a lot of those viewers are concentrated in other parts of the world, whether it's Korea or China, or the EU is even further along than the US. So I think what's happened due to coronavirus is we've gotten more of that awareness in the US, which is such a sports-centric culture, and you really realize it kind of when sports go away. In terms of the size, I think a lot of people look to Newzoo, which puts out a data point that suggests esports is around $1 billion market. I think that is severely understating the size and scope of the industry. The games industry is $150 billion per year, larger than the global box office and music industries combined. And when you look at which games are really being played as esports, incorporate that into your calculation. Also incorporate hardware that's being purchased to competitively play. You're talking about a $45 to $55 billion market, much different than $1 billion. And I really think when we're looking to put together these ETFs, we're going after what we believe to be secular trends. Yes, video games and esports are doing really well right now, but they're also set up for kind of this generational change that, younger people, even younger than ourselves, not just millennial, Gen Z, are turning to video games and watching people play video games in lieu of other forms of entertainment. And that's something that we can think is going to continue to play out. And I don't know if we'll get to the point where Korea is, where young kids want to grow up and the first thing they want to do is become a professional gamer. That might be more of a cultural thing. But I think we're seeing kind of the glimpses of that start to play out.
Well, with all of these numbers that you've just suggested, which are staggering, especially some of the global numbers, with how in, Korea, Japan, some of the Asian countries are doing so much, they're so much more further along. Why do you think there's a hesitation or a misunderstanding of this market with like investors in the US? Like, wouldn't you think that, with Amazon buying Twitch, you'd think that more people would want to go and, participate in this trend? What have you seen be kind of any major reasons why people might hesitate to want to participate?
Yeah, I think part of it is kind of a lack of kind of pure play gaming companies listed in the US, right? You have, in terms of household names, you have Activision, you have EA, you have Take-Two, and throw Zynga in there. A lot of these companies are actually listed in Hong Kong or listed in Japan. And maybe people, let's use Nintendo as an example. That's traded in Japan. I think a lot of people maybe don't realize or aren't spending as much time as they should based on the size of the industry. Just given the fact that there aren't as many options in terms of single securities for people to get exposure. That said, that's kind of where the ETF comes in, right? Like if you believe in this, just kind of buy the ETF without, especially if you don't have the ability to buy direct in Taiwan or Korea. And then I would also say it's this generational effect. Personally, like the way that we're seeing people find us, it's definitely skewing to a younger demographic. And we're getting in front of those investors, but older investors and older advisors still control a large chunk of the wealth in this country. And I think for them, it's kind of a learning curve of, hold on, you're saying it makes that much in revenues and that many people are watching? That just takes time.
Got it. So it's an education thing. That makes sense. I mean, it's interesting to see, how, all of how this entire industry kind of truly is global. And I think when you mentioned like Nintendo is not traded in the US, can you talk a little bit about some of the kind of more popular companies that your fund has in it? Because I think a lot of people might in the US might say, oh, well, Twitch, I have money in Amazon. That's my, I'm covered there. But obviously, you guys have a lot of other, when you mentioned this pure play aspect, I guess, can you elaborate a bit more on like what that means and who are some of the larger players that might not be in the US that the fund has? Sure.
And we're kind of going back to an earlier comment, which is buying Amazon to own Twitch is you're missing the mark if that's the way you're going about it, right? I think if Twitch shut down tomorrow, Amazon the stock would say, okay, don't care. In terms of some of the companies that are kind of comprise our top holdings in that fund, one that I think a lot of people have heard of but aren't really that familiar with is Tencent, traded in Hong Kong. That is one that you can buy via an ADR in the US. So some people are able to get exposure that way. We view Tencent as kind of a mini ETF in terms of how many games companies it's invested in. It holds all of Riot Games, which is League of Legends. It holds somewhere around 40% of Epic Games, which is Fortnite. It also owns Supercell, a big mobile eSports company. So they kind of have their hand in a ton of different things and really have a foothold in that China market. Some of its daughter companies that we also hold are Huya and Douyu, which are actually Chinese versions of a Twitch, which you mentioned. Twitch, as with many US apps and websites, are banned in China. So these are kind of the two leading companies in terms of game streaming in China, which is 5 times the size of the US market in terms of MAUs. Those are both listed in the US, so that their ADRs trade on US exchanges, so people can buy direct there. And then one last interesting company I'd point out, and this speaks to our pure play methodology, is one of our top holdings is Modern Times Group, trades in Sweden, which is the parent company for ESL and DreamHack, which operate esports leagues, esports events. And if you did a market cap weighted type of a product, you'd really, that's not that big of a company. I mean, it's less than $1 billion in market cap, but we say that's really an esports company when you look at it through and through. We want to give a higher weighting to that.